What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. In this video we're going to be wrapping up our 3-part series building an authentication system in Django and React. So this part of the video we're going to be building our ReactJS front end, so you can see what we're going to be building here. So we've got our login page. If I put in my user's details, it's going to log me in and take me to my account page where I've got some notes attached to the user, and I can log out, and if I really want to I can create a user as well. So this is everything we're going to be building in this part of the video. We've already created our Django backend in the last 2 videos, so if you haven't watched them, you're going to want to check them out. If this video helps you in any way, can you please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as it takes us a long way. And yeah, let's get into it, guys. I'm back in my Visual Studio Code. I've got my terminal open, and the first thing I want to do is create our React application. So I'm in my root directory, and I'm going to do npx create React app, and we'll call it front end. So if you notice, it creates this front end folder next to our backend and environment folders, so we're not in backend anymore. That's just gonna create all the files we need. So if I clear that, you open our front end folder, you can see it's got everything we need. We're gonna go into this folder, and then we need to install a few things. So we need to install Axios so we can call our APIs. We need to install React Router DOM so we can create multiple web pages, and then we also need to install something called Chakra UI, which is going to be a React front-end library where we can just build components straight away and it will look nice. Okay, so if we install Axios and then npm install React Router DOM, and the last thing we need to do, we're actually just going to go to the Chakra website. So if you go to Chakra and get started, it's going to give you this command to install everything we need. So just copy and paste that into your terminal. And then it's going to install everything we need, and we're actually ready just to run our front end server. npm start. And while we're at it, we might as well run our backend server as well. So we'll do Python 3, go into backend first. Python 3 manage.py run server. That's going to run there. So you can see we've got our front end running. First thing I want to do is actually just create our roots, and then we can create multiple web pages. So if I go into source here, create a new folder, and we'll just call it roots. Then we're going to create our first root, which is going to be our login page. And that's the first thing we're going to start on, is building our login page. So we've got our login page here. Just bring this down. What I'm going to do is just create an empty component, and then we'll do export default login. If I just do return page 1 login. Okay, so this is our login component, and then we're going to call this from app.js. So at the moment, this is what it's in our app.js file. If I just get rid of all of that, you'll see it just disappears. What we're going to do is we're going to create our multiple browser routes. Okay, so the way we're going to do that is we're going to import something called browser router from React Router DOM. So we import this as router, then we need to import roots, where all our roots are going to lie, and then we're going to import an individual root, which is going to be, for example, our login page. So if I get rid of this, then I do router, then inside our router we're going to have our roots, then inside our roots we're going to have our individual roots. Okay, so our first root we've got, we're going to have to import login. We're going to have an element, which is going to be our login component. Okay, and then we also have to state a path where we're going to find this element. So at the moment we're at login. This is where we want to call it from. So if I do path /login, I save that, you can see we get our login component here. If I went to my root URL, you see it disappears. So we'll go back to login. Okay, next thing I want to do is actually just build my login route. So we're going to go back to login and just expand this. What we're going to have to do, we're going to have to import a few things from Chakra. But before we can use any Chakra components, we have to actually wrap our app in something called a Chakra provider. This is going to allow our whole app to use Chakra components, okay? So if we just do import Chakra provider from Chakra UI React, then we're going to wrap our whole app in this Chakra provider, okay? Just tidy that up a little. Okay, there you go. So once you've done that, you need to make sure you do that. Once we do that, sorry, it's because this is not correct. What you imported so it was not found. Chakra should be right. There you go. So if we go to Chakra, we're gonna want to get a form. So go on components and just type in form. It's gonna give us a basic form template. So if we copy this, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to import something called a virtual stack. And basically this is going to keep all our elements in line vertically. So we'll have one input, then another input, then a button. Okay. So we'll put in this virtual stack, and then we're going to want to add the input we just copied from the website. Okay, now we don't need this helper text, and this type is going to be text, and it's going to be a username field. So if I actually just copy this, then this is going to be a password, and it's going to be a password field. And then next thing we want is a button, which is going to be our login button. Okay. So this is going to be broken at the moment because we need to import everything we've just used. So if we import form control, form label, and then input, and we go to our login page. Oh, sorry. Oh, we haven't returned it, that's why. So make sure you return your components, and then that will show up here. Okay. Next thing I want to do is I want to grab everything we type in the inputs. Okay. So everything we type in here, we want to grab that and put it in about you. So we're going to import something called useState. Then we're going to create two different states. We're going to create one for the username. We're just going to have a default value of nothing, because when we load the page, there should be nothing in the input field. And then create another one called password. So once we've done that, what we want to do is we're going to go into our input component for our username. We're going to do onChange, which means every time we type in here, we're going to set the username to be the value inside the input field. Okay, and then we can copy and paste that. And then we just do the same for our password. So set password. Then we also want to put in a value here, which is going to be the username and then the password. Okay, so that's going to grab everything we get in there. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to do something when we click login. So we're going to do const handle login equals that, and then when we click this button, it's going to call this function. Okay, now at the moment we haven't actually called our login API, so we're going to call our login API from in here. But to make our app tidy, we're going to put all our endpoints in a separate folder. Okay, so all the functions that call our API. So if you go to source, we'll create a new folder and we'll call it endpoints. And then in that endpoints, we'll create a new file called api.js. So first thing we want to do is actually get the URLs for all the APIs we're calling. So if I struggling to bring this up, there you go. Okay, so you can see I'm running on here. All right. So if I do const base URL, it's going to equal this value here. But if you remember, when we go back to our backend and you look into backend URLs, we put this API after it. So all our APIs are called with API here. And then don't forget this backslash at the end. And then if we go into our base and go into our URLs, you can see our login function has the name token with a backslash at the end, okay? So if I just do const login URL, that's going to be equal to our base URL. It's going to have a token on the end, okay? And then next thing I want to do is import Axios. And then we're going to create our API. So const, we're going to call it login. It's going to be asynchronous function. And then what we want to do is we want to get a response. We're going to await an Axios post request. And then we're going to put in our login URL. So this function needs to take in a username and a password. So we're going to send a username and a password. And then next thing we'll do is we want to send with credentials. Set that to true. So basically that's going to allow us to use our cookies, okay? Send our cookies in our header. And then we want to return response.data. And if you go back into our views, you can see that this is our login function, that we return success is true if it's worked and success is false if it doesn't. So we're going to get the data and then we'll do .success, which is going to return true or false whether we successfully logged in or not. We want to export this function. And now we can actually grab this from our login component. But before we do that, there's one thing we need to do. So in our backend, we haven't allowed anyone to call our API. So we have to use, if you remember in settings.py, we installed something called cause headers. So we haven't actually configured that so we can allow localhost 3000, whatever, that's what we're running on here, to call our API. If you're using a different localhost or whatever, you need to set allow that to as well. So we're going to go into our Django cause headers documentation. You're going to scroll down. You're going to make sure you have this in your middleware. So if you see common middleware, you paste that. Then you're going to scroll down. You need to copy this. So these are all the URLs that can call our API. Not that. So it's HTTP. So HTTP localhost 3000. And then one more thing we have to do is, if you scroll down, we have to cause allows credentials. I'm gonna have to set that to true. So once we've configured that, now our localhost 3000 can call our API. Go back here. So we're in our login component. If we import our login function from our endpoints API, then we're going to do login. We're going to pass in the username and the password. Okay. So with that done, we need to type in the user we created in the first video. So the super user. Do mat settings 1, 2, 3. And we didn't get any errors. So if I just go to application, cookies. Actually, let's just type that in one more time. 1, 2, 3. going to see we get our access token and we get our refresh token. So that worked perfectly fine. That's the cookies we want, and it's saved in our browser. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new root. So just close this. We're going to head to roots, create a new one called menu.js, and then we'll create a component called menu to return h1 menu, and then we'll export this. Okay, and then you're going to head back to your app.js, and then you want to import this so we can create a new root. Just delete that. So we're going to have it at the root path, and then just do menu. Okay, and if I go to our root path, you can see we have our menu here. So next thing I will do is create our user menu. So if I actually want that open, but if I go back to menu, we're going to import Visual Stack again, so we can have everything stacked vertically. So Visual Stack. So first thing I want is just a heading. We'll just call welcome back user. Okay. Then next thing I want is another virtual stack with a list of all the notes a user has. So to do that, we're going to have to go back into our APIs and create a new API that calls our notes, a notes API. Okay, so go into our backend, look into our base folder, then find URLs, and you can see we've got our get notes at the notes root. Okay, so API, we're going to create a new URL, call it notes URL, and just copying this, save time, just for notes instead. Okay, then we're going to create a new endpoint called get notes. It's not going to take in any parameters. I'm just going to write it like the last one, except it's going to be a get request. So axios.get. We want to pass in our notes URL, and then we're just going to pass in with credentials is true again, but we don't need to pass anything in the body. So we can return response.data, which is going to be an array of all our notes. But one thing we have to do is, if basically we're calling this notes with our access key. Okay, so you go into views. Yeah, we're calling this get notes, but we need to be authenticated to call this, whereas obviously you don't have to be if you're logging in. So the thing is, we've got our access key, which will expire in, say, 3 minutes. We're going to have to, if that's expired, when we call this API, so say we call it with our access key, our access key is expired, that means we're going to have to call our refresh token API so that we can get a new access key, if that makes sense. So just like I said, say we call our API, our access key is expired, so we should be logged in, but access key is expired. Then we're going to call our refresh token API, which you can see token refresh, which is going to give us a new access key so we can stay logged in. So the way we're going to do that, so we'll just create a new function and we'll call it refresh. First, we're actually going to have to call our refresh token. So export const refresh token. We do we do const response equals axios dot post.
is it a post request? Yeah. And then we're gonna have to create a new one. It's token / refresh. It's a refresh URL. And then we're gonna pass that in here. We're not gonna give anybody. Oh, actually, do we need to? No, we don't. And then we want to pass with credentials is true. Okay. Then we're going to return response, and what we return is refreshed. Dot refreshed. We'll do data before that. Okay, so that's going to call our refresh token API so that we can get a new access token. Now we want to create a local function, which is going to be call refresh. So it's going to want to take in an error, and if our error dot response, so if we have an error with a response and this error response is a 401 error, which means we're not authorized, then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to get our refresh token. So that was great. Make this asynchronous. So at the moment it's calling refresh token, and this is going to say if it was refreshed or not. So if it was refreshed, then what we want to do is we want to retry our response. Okay, so we'll do retry response equals await dot axios. So await. So we'll pass in function. Wait, func. Okay. And then we're going to want to return retry response dot data. And then if not, we'll just return false. Okay. So this is going to refresh our token, and then we can call this in a try catch. So we'll try this. Catch the error if it occurs, which could be if our access token fails. And then we're going to call refresh. Okay. We'll do return call refresh, and that's going to have the error, and then this function. So just clean it up a little. There you go. Looks good to me. So now we can get our tokens, and if it expires, we can refresh them, refresh the access token. We can go to our menu, and we're gonna have to import useEffect and useState. Okay, and we're going to create a new state called notes, and then we'll do set notes equals useState. It'll be an empty array to begin with, and then we're going to do useEffect, and what we want to do is we want to go fetch the notes. So we import, sorry, not const, import get notes from our endpoints, and then const fetch notes. So basically every time this page loads or renders, we're going to execute everything in here. So every time it loads, return refresh, we're going to get the notes. So we'll do const notes equals await get notes, and then we'll set the global notes to these notes we just fetched, and then we're going to want to call this function. Okay, so cannot of refreshed. So if we do await, and then we wrap this in a try catch clause, catch the error, and then return false. And then with this we can just return true, because if it executes it would have worked, and then we don't need that. Okay, that should work. I mean, we'll see when we stay logged in. We have to log in again. So we'll do map settings 1 2 3 login. Okay, and we'll head over to our menu. We want to display our notes, so make sure you have an array here, and then we can display our notes to the user. So we'll do notes.map note, and then we'll return text, and it'll just be a note description. There you go. You can see that we get the notes associated to the user, and we only have the one here, subscribe to map makes code, which you should do, of course. So didn't mean to do that. Next thing we want to do is create a logout button. So I just put button under here. We're going to do button, we'll do logout. So we'll give it a color scheme of red. So when we click this button, we're going to want to log out user. So we'll just create a handle logout function, and we'll handle logout. Okay, so what we need to do now is actually call our logout API from our endpoints. So we go to api.js, create a new URL called logout, and it's going to call logout, and then we're going to create a new function, which is going to be export const logout. It's going to be asynchronous function. So we'll do a response equals wait. It's going to be a post request. So we're going to pass in our logout URL. We're going to pass in nobody, and then we want with credentials to be true. And then we'll do the same thing actually as our refresh. So we'll return true if it was successful, and we'll return false if it wasn't. Okay. So if we go to menu, what we want to do is we'll do const, we'll have to import it, so logout, and what we'll do is we'll do success equals await logout. So this needs to be asynchronous, and if success, we'll navigate. So we actually need to create a navigation. So if we import use navigate, that's going to be from React Router DOM. We'll create a navigator. So nav equals navigate, use navigate, and then we'll just do nav, and we'll go back to the login page. Okay, and then what we want to do is actually log out. So we'll log out first. So actually, don't worry, that would have called logout already. So if it's successful, then we navigate to the login page. Okay, so we'll try this out. There you go. So it's successful. If I try to go to the home page, you can see I have no notes listed as I'm not logged in, and you can see we get this 401 unauthorized error. So we're not logged in anymore. If I actually press this, it's not going to work because I'm not logged in. You can see I get the error again. So we'll just go back to the login page. So next thing I want to do is I want to create it so I can't access the user menu page unless I am authorized. So unless I'm logged in, I can't go just to the URL and go to this page, because that shouldn't be allowed. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our source folder. We're going to create something called context. So create a folder called context, and then we're going to create something called useAuth. Okay. So in here, we're going to create some values that want to be accessed from our whole app. Okay. So something like is authenticated. We'll create a new login. We'll create a new logout, so it handles all our login and logout functionality. But the main one we're focused on is the is authenticated. So we actually made an API to check if a user is authenticated. So we're going to call that, and if we're in a private route such as menu, they won't be allowed to access it. Okay. So we're going to have to make a few imports. So we'll import create context, use context, use effect, and use state. Okay. So that's what we import, and then we want to create we'll create a context, and then we'll create an auth provider, which we're going to wrap our whole app with so that we can use our useAuth, and then we're just going to create our useAuth. Just give me a function that is going to be use context of our auth context. We're going to call this to access all our values such as is authenticated. Okay. And then what this is going to do is we're going to return auth context dot provider, and this is going to take in children, because the thing that's going to be passed around it is our app. Okay. Alright, so first thing we're going to do is just go to app.js, and we're going to import auth provider. Oh, we actually want to export that. So auth provider, and then we'll wrap our roots. Yeah, we'll wrap it around our roots. So copy that, paste it here. Okay. So with that done, we can go back to useAuth. Next thing we want to do is create a function that checks if get authenticated. So we're going to check if a user is authenticated, and we want to do this every time a new page loads. Okay, so every time we go to a new URL, and we do that by doing window.location.pathname. So every time this changes, we're gonna check if we're authenticated. Now what we want to do is we want to create a global variable called is authenticated, set is authenticated, use state. So by default it should be false. And then what this function is going to do is it's going to call our API and then change it depending if we're authenticated or not. Okay. So next thing we need to do is go back to our API, and we're going to call another API called is authenticated. This could be asynchronous. So we need to make a new base URL and I believe it's just called, just do authenticated. So we'll create response. Actually, we'll do this and try. So we'll do await axios.post. We'll do auth URL. It's going to pass in nobody, and we want some credentials. So with credentials is true. If that works, then we return true. If not else, catch. Then we're going to return false, and then we'll just pass in our error. Okay. So then we want to go back to our useAuth. So we're calling that. One thing we actually also want to add is something called loading. So it's going to take some time to check if we're authenticated or not. So we get if we haven't got that data yet to see if it is or not authenticated, we'll just show a loading page. Okay. Equals use state, and it's going to be by default loading. So in our get authenticated, what we want to do is we want to call our new API. So import is authenticated. Okay, and then we'll set our is authenticated to true. No, we'll set it to actually const success. We'll set it to this value here. Catch. Else, what we'll do is we'll set it to false. And then once we've decided if it's true or false, we will set loading to false. So we'll stop loading, and then we'll have if it's authenticated or not. Okay. So you can see at the moment we're not authenticated. So that's correct. Now what we want to do is we're going to create a new folder called components, and we're going to create a new file called private root, and this is going to be the roots. It's going to be a wrapper for the roots that we shouldn't be able to access unless we're logged in. So we'll do const private root. It's going to take in children. Then what we're going to do is import heading from chakra. We're going to import useAuth, and yeah. So before we move on, we actually need to go back to useAuth. So we've got this is authenticated and load in. In our provider, we're just gonna put value, and we need to pass in our is authenticated and our loading so we can grab it in our private root. Okay. So const is authenticated and loading. That's going to be from our useAuth. Okay, so just to double check. Yeah. Then what we'll do is we're going to do if loading. We're going to return just some loading text. Okay. If we are authenticated, then we're going to return what's inside, what we pass in here, which will be our component, our root. But if we're not, then what we're going to do is we're going to actually navigate. So we need to import use navigate. Const nav equals use navigate. So we're just going to navigate back to the login page if we're not authenticated. Okay. Then we want to export default private root. Okay. So if I go back to my app.js, then I'm going to import private root, and we're going to want to wrap our menu in this private root. Okay. There you go. So we're gonna check if we're authenticated. If we are, then it will display it. So if I do settings 1, 2, 3, there you go, and we can actually access this. So if I log out and then I try to access it, it's not going to allow me to do that. Okay, so that works perfectly. One thing I want to do is when I'm going to create a new in useAuth, we're just going to create a new login function. Login user, call it that. It's going to take in a username, a password, and then what we want to do is we're going to call our login like that endpoint, and then we'll do make sure it's asynchronous. So we do const success equals await login username password, and then if success, then what we'll do is we'll gonna have to create another navigation. So import use navigate, and then const nav equals use navigate. So nav to our menu, but first what we'll do is we'll set our is authenticated to true, and then that should be fine. So we'll pass this login user, and then what we want to do is we want to go to our login, and instead of using this now and get rid of that, we're going to do login user equals useAuth. So let's go import that. Then we're going to do login user instead. Okay, just to check it was login user. Passed it through. Yep. So if I do mat settings, we do 1, 2, 3. You can see it logs me in, and then I log out. Okay, that is it for the login and menu functionality. Next, all we need to do is create a register page where we can register a user. Okay, so if I create a new root called register.js, we can actually just go to our login page, and it'll be a lot easier if we just copy and paste this. So obviously we're gonna have to get rid of a lot of details, so I'll get rid of what I'll do first actually. So I'll make multiple of these. So next one's gonna be email. Next one's gonna be confirm password. Okay, and then we're gonna need another one of these. So it's gonna be email, set email, and then we're gonna have C password, set C password, and then what we want to do is change these so it's set email, and then email, and then we got set C password, and then C password. Okay, and that should be a password. So we'll change this to register. Gonna export register, and we can just comment that out. Not using that anymore. Okay, that looks okay. Next thing we'll do is go to our app, and then we're gonna import register, and then we can create a new route called register. Okay, and then at the bottom of our login, what we'll we'll do is import nav, use navigate, const handle navigate, and we'll just nav to register. Okay, and then we can have some text under our form, like sign don't have an account, sign up, then on click we'll handle nav, and then we need to import text and also create that nav. So when we click that, it takes us to our register page. Now what we will do is create our register API. So if we go to APIs, we're going to create a new one called register. And then so we'll just do const response equals axios.post. It's going to take in a username. Actually, sorry, we need to actually do our register. It's going to be register. It's going to take in our register URL. So we're going to have a username, which we'll pass in here. Going to take in a password. It's also going to take in email. So email, and then password is password. And then again, with credentials is true. Okay, and then we'll return response.data. And then in our views, you can see when we registered, we just return the data or an error. Okay, so we'll go to our API, got our register. I actually want to put this in our useAuth so that I can check if the password and use password are the same. So I'm going to do register user async. And this is going to take in a username, email, password, and then a C password. Okay. And then what we'll do is we'll register our user. Read import register, and then do const success equals register user. Wait. Register, and then we're just going to pass in the username, password, confirm password, see password. We also need to pass in the email. Okay, that's not it. So it's just a password there. What we'll do if password equals C password, then we'll do this. Else we'll display passwords don't match. Okay. Then we want to pass this out. Register user. If we go to our register, we've already got this here. Do register user instead. Do handle register. Do register user, email, C password. Sorry. We write like this. And then we're calling handle register. Okay, and then I actually just want to get rid of that. we'll do a try catch. If it doesn't, we'll do error registering user, else will alert successfully registered user. Okay, so I can go here, we'll do Matt makes code free. I don't know if I've got another one in there. We'll do m@testemail.com 123 123 successfully registered user. So it was Matt makes code free. Go back to our login. So Matt makes code free, then 123. And you can see it logs me in. So I don't have any notes associated with that user as we just created it, but you get the gist. So I'm not actually gonna add any more styling to this. It's really simple to use Chakra. So if you want to take this the extra mile and get to what I did before, it would really only take a couple of minutes. But yeah, so that is how you build secure authentication using Django and React. If this video helped you anyway, could you please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as it takes me a long way. And yeah, show this project off. It's really impressive to show on your GitHub and your CV. And if you're just building an application for an e-commerce site or social media or whatever, it's really useful to have. So thanks. If you like this video, please stick around and check other videos on my channel. Thanks a lot. Bye.